Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Council of Elrond, a Lord of the Rings podcast. On today's show, we're going to be continuing our series of looking at the major changes between Tolkien's and Jackson's Lord of the Rings. This episode is part 3 of our series, so we'll be discussing some of the biggest changes made to The Return of the King. As always, we would love to hear your thoughts on any and everything discussed in today's episode, so please get in touch on all social media platforms.
So it begins.
So I want to kick off today's episode by talking about Frodo and Sam. The scene where Frodo and Sam have their little tiff on the stairs, and Frodo gets really pissy and he makes a terrible decision to send Sam away, and he decides to trust Gollum over Sam.
Crumbs on his jacket says, he took it! He took it!
That's a filthy lie!
It's like, oh,
Cringeworthy every time.
Gets me, yeah, cringeworthy, but it's also like when Sam like says like don't send me away and his little cry. I always like I well up a little bit there. I'm like, oh no, poor old Sam. But yeah, so that's completely invented by Peter Jackson. That never happened at all in the book. So Frodo never sends Sam away on the stairs, and the scene of Gollum throwing away the lembas bread, that never happens, and the three of them just arrive to Shelob's tunnel without any sort of incident like that. And so again, just Peter Jackson sort of building a bit more tension there. Now, in the book, Sam and Gollum have the same relationship as they have in the movie, where they really kind of don't like each other. Yeah. They're really mistrustful of each other. Well, more so that Sam is mistrustful of Gollum. And Frodo and Sam are separated when they get into the tunnel, and Gollum starts to fight with Sam while Frodo is stung by Shelob. And so they do get separated at that moment, but it's not because he's been sent away or anything. Now, Sam starts he's winning the fight against Gollum, and then suddenly Gollum escapes and runs away. And so then Sam comes over and finds Frodo's like lifeless body just lying there. And in that moment, he takes the ring, and the same way that it is in the movie. In the movie, obviously, they don't show us taking the ring. And we think that the movie has us believe that the orcs have actually unwittingly come into possession of the ring. However, in the book, they show us immediately that Sam takes the ring. And not only do they show that he takes it, but he actually puts it on and he wears the ring in that moment so that he disappears and he can hide from the orcs that are coming to take Frodo's body. So obviously in the movie, he just kind of hides
behind a rock or something.
Hides behind a rock, yeah. And so in the book, it's crazy that he actually puts on the ring and he wears it. So we don't know that happens at all. So that's another.
So he actually becomes a little ring bearer.
Yeah, well, that is the moment that he becomes the ring bearer. Yeah, that is true. And again, another change will be that all of this happens in the Two Towers book, whereas this happens about 2/3 of the way into the final movie. So again, just the way that the layout of these things is quite a big difference as well. So, what do you think about that? What do you think that it was a good idea to introduce that kind of tiff between Frodo and Sam, or do you think that it was unnecessary, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, again, I think a lot of fans probably kind of roll their eyes a little bit when they see this and they go, oh, Frodo would never send Sam away. I think it's good for a movie to have that extra tension in there. I do think it is kind of funny how, they have their tiff, Frodo sends Sam away, and then Sam goes to the bottom of the bottom of the stair and then sees the lembas bread. He's like, wait a minute, I didn't eat that lembas bread. And then he gets all mad and goes back up. Like, it's kind of funny, but maybe it's supposed to just show like, oh, well, it was definitely Gollum that threw it over the edge. What a sneaky little shit. Like,
exactly. Yeah. So over the years, I've had different feelings towards that scene. And like initially, I remember like, as we've said a few times before, we saw the movies before we ever read the books. So I never had like a bad feeling about that. I never thought, oh, this doesn't make sense and Frodo would never do this. Because again, I think there's a lot of changes in Frodo's character between the movies and the books. And he's not the same person. He's not as strong-willed and he's not as he's not as much of a leader and as a wise character in the movies. Because he's portrayed by someone much younger than him. So I believed completely that he could have kind of been poisoned against Sam by Smeagol in that moment. I believed that scene and I thought it was really well made. And there's a couple of times where you're kind of going, why would he suddenly see the lembas bread down here and go, oh, I'm going to go immediately back up the whole way that I've just climbed down the whole day. I'm going to climb immediately back up. But it kind of, maybe he's...
What a pain.
Exactly, but like...
climbing all the way down there and then up again. Like.
I know, and he had a nasty fall as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be he must have some serious quads, Sam. Like, just like climbing down a big mountain and then be like, right, back up we go, get the old, the calves and the quads working. But
how is he still a stupid fat hobbit?
I know, it's doing some serious working out. Like, he must be just eating serious amounts of lembas bread.
Yeah, must be very fattening. I wonder if Frodo sent him down.
Maybe he found some roast chicken on the way.
Maybe.
That hobbit is always so polite.
So yeah, I think it's a pretty good scene where it kind of just adds that extra little bit of tension. And again, because of Frodo's different type of character in the movies, you could definitely see that it's a possibility for the Peter Jackson style Frodo. But I don't think Tolkien's Frodo would have ever dismissed his relationship with Sam so easily, and he wouldn't have been kind of tricked by Smeagol so easily. So I think again, I see the argument for the Tolkien like purists, but then I also see, when I was watching it as a movie, it made perfect sense in the movie to sort of create this tension between these two characters, and for them to be, again, another little sort of story arc where they could have tension, have like a falling out, and then build that relationship back again. And it doesn't last a long time before Frodo realizes he made a terrible mistake.
Yeah, but it is another stroke of genius, I suppose, from Jackson. The way he kind of shows the power of the ring and how it poisons Frodo, and I think throughout the whole second and third movie, well, especially the third movie, it shows how physically sore it is on his neck, and his eyes are so like black. It looks like he hasn't slept, and he just doesn't look himself. And especially in that scene, I remember with the music and everything, it just almost looks like Frodo completely just switches, and he's just not himself at all. And he's like, "Go home, Sam." And you do feel like this isn't Frodo. And then you get to see him later when he doesn't have the ring on him, when he's up in Minas Morgul, and Minas Morgul, I mean Cirith Ungol. And he's not wearing the ring. And when Sam comes to rescue him, there's that part where he puts the ring back over his head again, and he just completely goes back to his like lower demeanor.
Yeah, again, in that exact moment when he takes the ring back from Sam, and you can see that Sam has had the ring for like, we don't know, a very short period of time, and he's struggling to get rid of it. He's struggling to give the ring back to Frodo. So it's like, and remember in that scene with what they do with the sound, it's like Frodo saying, "Sam, give me the ring," and it's like this sort of distant, far away sound, and it's almost like Sam just sort of, it's so like incomprehensible, and he doesn't even know what's going on, and it's like he gives the ring to Frodo, and suddenly the sound comes back. It's like he can hear clearly again, and it's like this. Yeah, it's obviously this huge burden and this huge weight to carry the ring,
and the way Sam is looking at Frodo in that scene, it's almost like
it's really cool.
Do you know when someone's talking to you and you're staring at something and you're kind of not really paying attention, and you don't want to stop staring because you're having a good time?
He looks like Dougal from Father Ted in that moment. I think his eyes are just like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah. So that's what the ring does to Dougal.
Yeah, exactly.
Mrs. Doyle was telling me that it's got magnets on its tail. So as if you're made out of metal, it can attach itself to you. And instead of a mouth, it's got 4 arses. Dougal!
So then, do we think that was a good addition by Jackson?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I think it was it wasn't needed, but I do like it. It's
So we got the scene that we wanted, not the scene that we needed. #Dark Knight.
But it was the scene that we needed to watch. Dark Knight. For Gotham. Dark Knight.
The next thing that I want to talk about is one of my favorite memes.
Ooh.
Which is one of my favorite memes with Theoden. Can you think of the meme I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, is it the one where he's, how many do we have? Not half as much as I wanted.
That's a class one as well. But no, it's more famous than that one. Theoden when he's angrily saying something.
I can't think.
Gondor.
Oh yeah, right. Where was Gondor?
Exactly.
That one.
Yeah, so that scene where Theoden saying like, "Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?" So that scene, that's obviously that's like now become legend in meme form, and So I just want to talk about the behind that scene a little bit, and not just, I don't want to talk about where Gondor was when the Westfold fell, So I want to talk about something else, which is actually the lighting of the beacons in the book compared to the movie and the significance that had. Obviously, the lighting of the beacons is Gondor asking Rohan for aid, and that was what that signified. And the movie makes a really big deal about the lighting of the beacons, and it's like actually one of the most spectacular scenes. I believe in our favorites episode, you said that this was this is your favorite scene in the entire trilogy.
Yeah, definitely. The music, the scenery, it's incredible.
Yeah, so it's one of the most spectacular visual scenes, and it's just really, really amazing. Now, in the book, it's just not a big deal at all. And in fact, in the first...
Wait, are you telling me in the book it doesn't say Howard Shore just goes off the charts?
Yeah, Howard Shore.
And then there is a big scene showing loads of mountaintops. I think Tolkien said that in the book.
Exactly. And he said Howard Shore spits fire, and we all have eargasms.
Howard Shore slays. Yeah.
So in the book, in chapter 1 of The Return of the King, it opens up and Pippin and Gandalf are on Shadowfax riding to Minas Tirith, and they look over and they just kind of go, "Oh, look at that! The beacons are lit."
Yeah,
and
that's right.
It's just like a passing comment, like, "Oh, the beacons are lit. Oh, that's cool." And there's not
Gondor calls for aid.
Exactly. There's not this big like thing with like Gondor calls for aid and whatever. And obviously in the movie we see the beacons being lit, and then it's this big decision from Theoden. He says, and Rohan will answer, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously before, the reason that there was that tension was because before the beacons had been lit, they were talking about the possibility of who was going to help who, and they asked Theoden, what about Gondor? And Aragorn says to him, Gondor will come. And Theoden has this whole thing where he says, Gondor, where was Gondor when the Westfold fell? Where was Gondor when our enemies closed in around us? And all this type of thing. And he says he's really kind of angry with Denethor, and he's really angry with Gondor. But it's really kind of a lot bigger, his mistrust of Gondor in the movie than it is in the book. So that scene of him having that angry dialogue towards Gondor just never happens. And also, as I said, the beacons are already lit before Pippin and Gandalf arrive. So Pippin has nothing to do with lighting the beacons. And so we don't get that scene of Pippin climbing up the side of the mountain and lighting the beacon as well, which is obviously, I think I could say that Jackson probably added that scene to give Pippin more to do and kind of, because obviously he's got so many parts in the movie where he's just being an idiot and being a fool of a toque. And so obviously they want to be like, let's for once give Pippin something where he's like useful.
Yeah, that's a really cool change.
Yeah, did you like that? Obviously I know that you liked the scene where it shows the lighting of the beacons, but what do you think about that really famous meme of that whole where was Gondor, and just like that's not a thing at all in the books?
Yeah, I think any added Theoden scenes is just a big win. Just seeing him have any sort of dialogue is always good, and it is kind of funny where he's kind of debating with Aragorn. He's like, where was Gondor, blah blah blah, and he's kind of giving out, and then as soon as Gondor come asking, he's like, and Rohan will answer. It's kind of like, well, who's he having a tiff with? He's just kind of talking about how they never show up, and then he just kind of changes his mind. But
I agree with you. I think that Bernard Hill, if you just give him as much screen time as possible, you're gonna be happy for it. But then also it kind of shows his character that, you know, when they're speculating over whether or not Gondor will come or whatever, or vice versa, he's kind of he's showing, look, I'm angry with Gondor. But then as soon as Gondor calls for aid, he's like, yes, we're going to go and help them. So it's like...
he's a truly good king, like, in comparison to the Steward of Gondor.
Yeah, he's faithful in those times when he's called upon.
And you were talking about the change with Pippin as well, him doing the climbing act and getting a light. It's, like, again, it's not needed at all, but it's cool. Like, it's a really good scene. I wouldn't be like, that's pure daft. It's a good scene. Having him to climb up there and having a little funny dance around in the flame, and of course it starts off the whole lighting of the beacon scene. So
I really like that whole part. When I see Pippin climbing up the side, I'm like, kind of going, go on Pippin, do it. Because obviously he's got a few parts in the book as well where he's kind of heroic, and they don't show that in the movies. So it was nice to give him a little moment of heroism. So I think we both agreed that's another nice addition and a justified decision by Peter Jackson.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, perfect. Cool.
Where was Gondor when the Westfall fell?
The next change I want to talk about is to do with Gandalf versus the Witch King. Now, yeah, this is the big one. So,
Mama.
in the movie, we do have a scene with these two heavyweights facing off inside Minas Tirith after the forces of Mordor had already entered the city and started to run riot. So, if we remember, the Witch King arrives on top of a fell beast and he taunts Gandalf and he says to Gandalf, "Do you not know death when you see it?" His sword then bursts into flames and Gandalf's staff shatters from the power of the Witch King and Gandalf is thrown to the ground off Shadowfax's back. It's really cool, that scene. Then he continues to taunt Gandalf while Gandalf just sits on the floor looking totally defeated and it seems that he's almost given up. And then at that point, the Rohirrim arrive and blow the horns and quickly the Witch King has to go and deal with Theoden. So Gandalf looks like absolute shite after the scene.
Awful.
And do you remember after that, immediately he goes to save Faramir and his eyes are black and he's just like, after his encounter with the Witch King, it's like he's been completely...
He's so drained looking.
Yeah, he's just like, so drained because and his staff has been broken. Like that's his... one of his most important things, and that's where he channels his power and all of that kind of thing. So that's a really memorable scene. Now, obviously, this is one of the most important and considerable changes from the events in the book. So in the book, this scene never happens, and it's very doubtful that it could have happened. From the film version, it seems that the Witch King is vastly more powerful than Gandalf, and breaking his staff is a major sign of this. In the book, Gandalf and the Witch King do come face to face at one point, when the Witch King is trying to enter Minas Tirith. So Grond breaks the door of Minas Tirith and the enemy are about to enter being led by the Witch King. And the Witch King is on a black horse holding a flaming sword and he wears a crown on an invisible head. He taunts Gandalf, but Gandalf resists him and they square off at the entrance. And Gandalf is not overpowered and certainly does not lose his staff. And then that again, similar to the movie, that's the moment when Theoden arrives and the Witch King is taken away. So it kind of fizzles out and we don't get this big battle between the two of them. I'm just going to read a short passage from the Return of the King now in the chapter called The Siege of Gondor. "You cannot enter here," said Gandalf, and the huge shadow halted. "Go back to the abyss prepared for you. Go back, fall into the nothingness that awaits you and your master. Go." The Black Rider flung back his hood, and behold, he had a kingly crown, and yet upon no head visible was it set. The red fires shone between it and the mantle's shoulders, vast and dark. From a mouth unseen there came a deadly laughter. "Old fool," he said, "old fool, this is my hour. Do you not know death when you see it? Die now and curse in vain." And with that he lifted high his sword, and flames ran down the blade. So
Deadly.
That's a pretty cool passage. And kind of gives me shivers reading that. But then, unfortunately, we never get to see the outcome of what would have been between Gandalf and the Witch King if they had fought. However, if we were to speculate, I think the outcome would have been very different from the movie.
I think Gandalf would have definitely overpowered the Witch King.
Yeah, now obviously I've been researching this podcast and so I've made a few points, so I'm going to give them now and you can tell me what you think about each one. So firstly, Gandalf has already fought all 9 Nazgul at Weathertop alone. This is another big change that we don't see in the movies, and this happens in the Fellowship of the Ring in the first movie. In the first book. So a few days before Aragorn and the hobbits arrive at Weathertop, which is where Frodo gets stabbed, Gandalf arrives there alone, and he is being pursued by the 9. They catch up to him there, but Gandalf says that they didn't dare come near him during the day because they were afraid. So all 9 Nazgul were afraid of Gandalf. And if I read a quick passage from the Fellowship of the Ring, "They drew away from me, for they felt the coming of my anger, and they dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. But they closed around at night, and I was besieged on the hilltop, in the old ring of Amansul. I was hard put to it indeed. Such light and flame cannot have been seen on Weathertop since the war beacons of old." So basically, they waited until nightfall, and then the 9 attacked Gandalf, and he held them off. And it ended as a draw. and that was also
We'll call it a draw.
that was when he was Gandalf the Grey. He wasn't even the White at that stage. So he battled all 9 of them, and he escaped, and he fended them off. So that was pretty impressive to have done that already in the first book. So
yeah.
Also, there was a lot of lightning. There was a big lightning battle between him and the 9. And Aragorn describes witnessing that in the book as well. When they're a couple of days away from Weathertop, he looks off in the distance and he sees this big lightning battle, and he's like, he doesn't know what's going on. And it's then a while later we learned that it was because of this. It was this battle between Gandalf and the 9 Nazgûl. So it was like their battle could have been seen from miles away. So that's pretty class.
That is cool. I'd like to have seen some of that in the movies. Just a bit of lightning power. I'd say if the movies were created in this day and age with loads of CGI, they would definitely be showing that. But
possibly again, there's so many things that I when I read the book, I'm like, oh man, I wish this was in it. But it's like you can't have everything. It's like it's
no.
I don't know how Jackson and his team were like, okay, we're just going to not have this and not have this, and like how they managed to like.
It must have been such an impossible task. Like all these changes we talk about, even if we just talk about the layout alone, if you wanted to keep it as close as possible, but just wanted to change, adding Shelob into the third movie and adding Barma's death into the first movie, just like changing the order of the events. A task in itself.
Yeah, when I'm looking through the actual changes and I want to make this podcast, I'm so indecisive about the things that I want to include. It's so difficult for me to say, I must include this. And it's like, and this is such a small, minor thing. So making the actual movie must have been so hard to make these decisions. But anyway, I have another point, which is that Gandalf is a Maya. We've already spoken about this on the podcast and what a Maya is, that they are these spiritual beings. To give you some context, Sauron is also a Maya, and the Balrogs are also Maiar, which is the plural. So Gandalf has defeated a Balrog before, while he was Gandalf the Grey. So at that point, he certainly wasn't at the bottom of the Maiar power ladder. And after his return, he's probably closer to the top than the middle of that ladder. The Witch King, however, is a servant of Sauron. So it would be incredible if the servant of one Maya was more powerful than another Maya. And Sauron was probably the most powerful Maya that there was. He was probably more powerful than Gandalf. Well, not probably, he was. But I don't think his servants could have reached the level of Gandalf the White. I think that's a bit too far of a stretch.
Yeah. Be like Frodo being as powerful as the Witch King because he's Gandalf's servant.
Exactly. And so like Maya, it's like, imagine if the Maya are men. Obviously some men are stronger than other men, but that doesn't mean that like a different race completely, like a bunny rabbit isn't going to be stronger than any man, basically.
Well, there's no ordinary rabbit. It's a killer.
Then the next point is that the Witch King, if we want to look at something in favor of the Witch King is more powerful now than ever because Sauron is more powerful now than ever and their power is connected. His power also increases in close proximity to Sauron, so he is very strong at the moment. Finally, in a letter, Tolkien once said that Sauron enhanced the Witch King with an added demonic force. So he has this extra like boost as well, this extra little juice that Sauron has given to him. However, it's
spinach.
Exactly. However, it'd be like he gave him a little bit of Popeye spinach there. So, however, even with all of that, I think it still seems unlikely that he would have been strong enough for a being as powerful as Gandalf the White. And then the final little note that I had was that Gandalf is also in possession of one of the 3 elven rings of power, which we spoke about as well before. He has Narya, the Ring of Fire. So
yeah, he's just upgraded to the max. Like he's got all the added additions.
Exactly. And in the previous podcast, we spoke about we said that we didn't really know exactly what that could add to him, but it couldn't have hurt his chances to have an extra ring of power. That's definitely going to give him another little extra boost as well. So for me, I think there's only one outcome, and I think the Witch King is getting his head caved in.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. I think they added it into the movie just to make us worry about Gandalf a little bit, but I think Gandalf he's a beast. Like he would have easily been able to kill the Witch King. They wanted to make the Witch King seem so much more powerful than he was, and it works. And maybe it's a good change. I don't know. We'll see what you think. I don't even know myself if I think it's a good change.
Yeah,
I just think it's different. It's a different way of telling the story to make him more powerful. They could have had it the way it was and just have Gandalf. It doesn't affect the story really at all. It just kind of it makes the viewer worry a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, there are pros and cons to this choice, and I think that the con is that the viewer from the movie comes away not realizing how powerful Gandalf the White is. And just to give you one small other idea of some of Gandalf's power is that during the Battle of Minas Tirith, when Sauron covered the entire sky with this dark cloud and the whole of Minas Tirith was covered in dark cloud, Gandalf the entire time had light shining on him. So the cloud couldn't stop the sun from shining on Gandalf, only on
That's
Gandalf.
Incredible.
It's like if you watch some of those movies where it's like someone that has like a cartoon where someone has bad luck and it's like raining just on top of that person. It's like that, but
like
the opposite for Gandalf. So it's like, that's just one tiny little detail that I think is really cool as well.
I think I think just the fact that they had so many, especially when Gandalf turns to Gandalf the White, they have included so many scenes of him being so powerful, like that scene when he's facing off with Saruman and he sends down a firebolt and he just completely Luke Skywalkers it and he's grand, and then he's easily able to say, Saruman, your staff is broken. I think they just wanted another bad guy that was on par with Gandalf and actually maybe even more powerful. And yeah, it may not be accurate, but it's good for a movie.
No, I agree that for so I was saying that was the con, but there are definitely pros as well in terms of a movie. And when you're watching a movie and it's very visual, exactly, the storytelling point of view, there's always these kind of waves that you're kind of like, you're up and you're down, and like the whole the warrior's journey. And it's like you have these like little mini wins and mini losses all the time. So when you're like watching the battle at Minas Tirith, and suddenly you're thinking, right, we've got the White Wizard. We're gonna easily win. There's nothing that's gonna defeat him. And suddenly, Jackson kind of introduces his character, kind of going, no, this guy is at the same level, or he's even more powerful. He shows that he's much more powerful than Gandalf. So immediately you're thinking, oh my God, like we're screwed again. So it's kind of, that's again, you're on this sort of like down slope of, oh, we're in despair, and how are we going to win this battle? So again, like from a movie standpoint, I can see the reason for it. So, but after talking about that, what's your final takeaway? What do you think now? Would you have rather seen Gandalf just wipe out the Witch King easily, or again, we don't see that either in the book, but would you have rather have seen Gandalf stay on Shadowfax's back and kind of face the Witch King strongly, and then the Witch King needs to run away, or do you like the fact that for a brief moment we think, wow, this guy is so powerful?
I'm a bit indifferent, but I do think after, of course, watching the movies, I've always loved the scene and I've always loved the things about it. I like the way the Witch King seems really powerful, but I think if you want to be really strict with the rules of Middle-earth, I think it is a little bit silly that the Witch King is more powerful. And as well, the way he's kind of seen in the movies, it's like, oh, he's got a big upgrade because we gave him a helmet and now he's got a big mace. It doesn't make him more powerful. He's more badass, I suppose. But when you think about it, he's just got a bigger weapon and he's flying on a bigger beast. And they don't explain how he has suddenly become very powerful.
Exactly.
Movies.
So that's true. So as I explained a few moments ago, that he is, and by Tolkien's own word, he is a lot more powerful now than he was, for example, when he faced Gandalf in the first movie. But and like he's upgraded, like he's got a massive boost from since then. But also Gandalf has had a massive boost as well. So I still think it's just too far of a reach. But as you said, we don't really see that he's got this massive boost in the third movie. And maybe that's the reason why they didn't show Gandalf defeating all 9 in the first movie so easily, so that they could make you believe that this Witch King was in fact more powerful than Gandalf.
Yeah, they're just a looming threat throughout all 3 movies, where they don't really get to they face off with Frodo that one time and Aragorn comes and scares them away, but it's kind of almost like this threat that's behind the scenes. Yeah,
so it's a little bit anticlimactic that they finally come face to face and then there is no actual battle between the two of them, because that's kind of what the prophecy of no man can kill the Witch King. It's kind of have been building up to that for all the way through the books. You're thinking okay, there's a prophecy that says no man can kill the Witch King. So you're kind of thinking all the time, it's going to be Gandalf, who's not a man. He's a Maya. He's an Astari, which is a wizard. You're thinking that's what's going to be the thing that kills him. And then eventually they finally come face to face and you're like, here we go. And then that doesn't happen. So it's kind of like maybe Tolkien's kind of like psych to like all the readers, like as in you guys thought this was coming and now I'm going to throw you a curveball. So maybe that's what it was. I'm not sure, but I'm not going to disagree. I never feel disappointed really in that moment because I know the story, I know what happens, and I just enjoy the way Tolkien describes it. But as I said, it would have been pretty cool if them two guys had actually had a fight and we saw what happened. Because, as I said, I think Gandalf would have won, but the Witch King is quite a powerful being, so he definitely would have put up a good fight.
Do you not know death when you see it, old man?
Yeah. Maybe they could do similar to Marvel where they have a what if series and they have what if the Witch King and Gandalf could actually face off and we could see what happens there. Yeah, that would be cool.
That would be cool. So, final point from you. Do you think this is a good addition, good change, or do you think it would have been even better if he just left it the way Tolkien wrote it?
Again, I like it. I like the scene and there's nothing negative to me, but out of all the scenes we've discussed, I definitely think it's needless and
I agree.
Probably Tolkien's one is probably better. It shows what Gandalf is really, what his worth is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I prefer Tolkien's Gandalf, who just can't be overpowered by the Witch King, and maybe the only thing that could really overpower him would be Sauron himself. So I think I prefer that. So I still like the scene in the movie, but if I were deciding it, I think I might have maybe not done it in the same way. So the next change that I want to discuss is the actual destroying of the ring and Gollum's death. Ooh. So obviously in the movie, we remember that Gollum bites the finger off Frodo and then they have their little dance pushing and shoving each other and then they both fall off the edge and Frodo does his, cling onto the edge of the cliff kind of thing, that really kind of dramatic visual thing.
Pure Fast and Furious.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of kind of like a Michael Bay kind of style scene. So in the book, that's not the way it happens exactly. And Gollum inadvertently destroys the One Ring when he loses his footing and falls into the cracks of doom. And after finally reclaiming his precious from Frodo, he does bite his finger and that all happens, but he just kind of slips and falls in. So the initial change was that they thought it was a bit anticlimactic to just have Gollum slip and fall in, and maybe the way that Tolkien described it was really, really cool in the book, but they couldn't make it look good visually. It just seemed like a sort of a silly way for him to come to his demise. So do you think that that's a good idea to have to sort of like wrestle on the edge? And
yeah, I don't remember that at all, that Gollum slips. That's actually really surprising to me. The way it's done in the movie is so epic. Like Gollum finally getting the ring, and Frodo did kind of turn evil a bit, so it's like his final redemption is to just push Gollum over, and it's kind of almost like Frodo is like sacrificing himself a little bit. You don't know what's going on through his head. Is he like, I'm going to push us both off, or
I always thought that he was Gollum? I always thought that they were wrestling just because Frodo was so like trying to get the ring back.
He wanted the ring.
I think that's what they kind of went for in the movie. Now, in actual fact, the producers initially had planned to have Frodo push Gollum off the cliff with the last of his willpower, but then eventually they rejected that idea because it looked too much like cold-blooded murder. So, and again, I can see that as well when you've got like, it's like, I think it was 12 PGs, and so you can see like maybe a 12-year-old in there and watching Frodo just shove Gollum off the cliff into the fire would have been a little bit like after building him up as this as the hero of the story, and they'd be like, look at him, he just murdered that creature. It's like maybe it's a little bit too on the nose. So
that's what Elrond should have done.
Well, speaking of that, that's also another change, that Elrond was never in Mount Doom with Isildur. He told Isildur on the battlefield, you should probably go and throw that in that big mountain over there in that volcano. But Isildur was like, no, I'm keeping this. But like they never did this like big march over to Mount Doom, and they never went into the fires or anything like that. So that was another small change from the movies. What's your view on this point? Do you think that this is a nice addition?
Yeah, I definitely think it's that ending scene is perfect. I think the music is unbelievable again for the scene, and yeah, the way it happens, just Frodo turning evil at the end. Watching it with my girlfriend and her reaction was brilliant. Like, it was her first time watching the movie, and she was like, "Wait, no, Frodo doesn't turn evil, does he?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, just you wait." And yeah, him putting on the ring, then Gollum biting the finger off him, and then his kind of, yeah, like, I don't know, is it his redemption or is it him wrestling for the ring? I suppose he is wrestling for the ring, but is it like, I'm wrestling because I want the ring, or is it I'm wrestling to get it off you and then throwing it in? I don't really know, but I think that's better than Smeagol just tripping and falling in. I don't really remember how it's done in the book. So,
well, in the book, it's all the same up until the final wrestling point. So it is the same.
Yeah.
Frodo does put on the ring. Smeagol bites his finger.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just don't remember how that was cool in the books, but obviously it must have been done well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely give Jackson the point on this one, because I think it's a perfect ending.
So the next change that I want to talk about is the omission of the Dunedain Rangers from the movies. So from the movies, we know that Aragorn is a Dunedain, a race of men blessed with long life. And Aragorn also tells Éowyn that there are few of them left in one scene that we see in the Two Towers. We aren't told too much about Aragorn before his time in The Lord of the Rings, apart from hearing that he grew up in Rivendell. What we don't know is that he was the leader of a group of around 30 Dunedain warriors before he went to Rivendell to the Council of Elrond. This group was called the Grey Company, and one of their main tasks over the many years was, in fact, protecting the borders of the Shire. So, cool. If I read a quote here from a character called Halbarad, he says, "A little people, but of great worth, are the Shire folk. Little do they know of our long labour for the safekeeping of their borders, and yet I grudge it not." So that was Halbarad, who was one of Aragorn's best friends and his second in command, and he becomes the leader of the Grey Company when Aragorn's not around. So then in the book, after our company of heroes have left Saruman locked in his tower, they're met by this Grey Company, who are also travelling with Elrond's twin sons. So these two other elves that we don't meet. And this was around the time that Theoden and Aragorn were planning to ride to Gondor's aid and to war. So both Theoden and Aragorn are delighted that this group of warriors are going to join them. And a quote from Theoden says, "It is well, if these kinsmen be in any way like yourself, my lord Aragorn. 30 such knights will be a strength that cannot be counted by heads." So the Grey Company, they're just like this big gang of they're basically like 30 Aragorns just showing up, and so Theoden is like delighted, like he's so happy. So then this Grey Company, along with Elrond's sons, they join Aragorn and they fight beside Aragorn and the rest of the guys as like a special elite force for the remainder of the story. So they travel with Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli into the Mountains of the Dead, and they recruit the Dead Army. They take over the fleet of ships, which were the Corsairs of Umbar, and along with the army of the dead. And then at that point, after they took over the ships, the fleet of ships, Aragorn releases the army of the dead before they arrive at Pelennor Fields with the Grey Company.
Release us.
So the Dead Army never make it to the Pelennor Fields, and when Aragorn arrives there at the Pelennor Fields, he arrives with his Dunedain Rangers, that force that he has with him, and Elrond's sons, and of course Gimli and Legolas. Also, Halbarad, who I spoke about before, Aragorn's second in command, he also had the responsibility of bringing a message and gift to Aragorn from Arwen. The gift was called the Standard of Elendil, which was a banner of the White Tree of Gondor with 7 stars and a crown embroidered in gold and mithril, made by Arwen, bearing the mark of the king. Now, this was a signal to Aragorn that the time had come to reclaim the throne. And the Standard of Elendil was a very important symbol in Lord of the Rings, but Jackson wanted to have it be a more obvious symbol at this time that the audience could see and recognize. So that's why we get the scene of Elrond arriving and delivering the new
With the
reforged sword exactly to Aragorn in the tent. So that that scene was kind of the equivalent of, instead of Arwen sending a gift to Aragorn to represent the moment of reclaiming the throne, they had Elrond, her father, come and give him a gift, which was also symbolizing you are now the king. So they had really built up the importance of that sword since the first movie. So we immediately, as the audience, we saw that sword and we're like, oh man, shit's going to go down right about now.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool change. However, as I was saying earlier in the podcast, Jackson's his eye for detail and him knowing that the fans of Lord of the Rings are going to want to see these details. We do get a glimpse of the Standard of Elendil during Aragorn's coronation.
Ah, right.
Any idea?
Is it the banner that's covering Arwen?
Exactly. Yeah. So when Arwen is hiding behind this kind of little banner, that's the Standard of Elendil that she's holding in that moment. So
that's class. That's what I was imagining when you were talking about it. I was like, yeah, like that little banner that's covering her. That's cool.
Exactly. So it's really nice for Jackson to know the importance of that and to give that little Easter egg for the fans. So what do you think about that change? Would you have liked to have seen these special elite force of the Dunedain Rangers?
Definitely. I think that's one of the weaknesses with all the battles in Middle Earth. I think all the battles are amazing the way they're shown, but there is that one thing of them always getting reinforcements to come and save them. Like in Helm's Deep, they have Éomer's big giant army, and in Minas Tirith they have the undead army, and they get Éomer's army as well at Minas Tirith. But when the Moonkill come, you're like, oh right, so it's kind of evens the playing fields,
the Pelennor fields,
but. The Pelennor fields. It evens the Pelennor fields, but the one thing with the undead showing up, like, it's really cool, but it's game over. Like, it's too easy then.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a like. I actually kind of feel a bit crap at that point in the movie when they show up and they're just Aragorn and Legolas are just looking around themselves for people to kill. And the undead are just like destroying Moonkill left, right, and center.
Yeah, me too. I have kind of a similar. I mean, the first time you see it, and you're thinking, how are they going to defeat these Moonkill? It's impossible. And then finally, Aragorn shows up with all the undead army. You're kind of going, thank God for all that. But I agree with you that it is kind of like, for me, it's a little bit anticlimactic that it's just these these ghosts that just can't be killed are just like flying through the enemy, and they're just wiping them out so easily. It's just like a little bit. So I think we both agree that maybe this one is not Jackson's best change.
No, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right, very, very good. It's not as epic as I think it would have been if Aragorn showed up with a gang of 30 other Aragorns.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cop out, and I would have loved to have seen the what are they called? The Grey League,
the Grey Company.
Gandalf the Grey Company.
Exactly.
Very good. Yeah, no, I would have loved to have seen them, and I remember in the book when they meet up with them, and it's a shame that they couldn't work them into the movie somehow. Obviously, there's so many balls in the air for Jackson, but like,
yeah, exactly.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
So the next change is about the character of Sauron. So, not a huge change, but something just that I wanted to talk about quickly, which was obviously in the last podcast, we spoke about the fact that in the books, it's highly implied that Sauron has a physical body and is not this just big floating flaming eye. Now, we never get to see Sauron physically, but there was a point in the movies where we almost saw Peter Jackson's Sauron making a physical appearance. Do you know when that moment was? I have a feeling you do.
I do. Yeah,
of course you do.
It's that scene. They probably filmed it, I think, or did they? I don't know. Yeah, it's the scene where the troll stands on Aragorn, and he has that kind of that little standoff at the Black Gate. But yeah, originally that was supposed to be Sauron.
Yeah, that's correct. That's exactly correct. Well done. So I knew you'd know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the final battle at the Black Gate, where. Now, again, this isn't really a change from the book, but it's kind of like a change within a change. So it's like Jackson decided to make that change, and then he finally changed his mind at the end. So Jackson had originally shot a scene where Sauron comes down from his tower and fights against Aragorn in the middle of that battle. But he eventually changed his mind and swapped that scene for that large troll. So what do you think about that? Do you think that that's a good idea I'm speaking about his final decision that he went for. Do you think that that's a good decision, or would you have liked to have seen Sauron come down and battle with his big giant mace?
Yeah, I think he did well to change his mind back to a troll, because
it was well.
It was well with my soul that he did that. But no, I don't know, because we don't know how Jackson would have done it. Like, maybe he would have, I don't know, maybe Aragorn would have been able to use some little magic. Well, like, Aragorn wasn't going to defeat Sauron. Were they just going to battle and kind of draw with each other until the ring was destroyed? Or I don't know what was going to happen, but it would have been weird to see Aragorn be able to defeat Sauron then and there, because the way Jackson has it as a big eyeball in the sky, like we said previously in the last episode, the whole threat of the ring coming back to Mordor is that Sauron might be able to regain his full power, and that would have been weird if he just came out of the game.
I don't think it would have made sense, especially not in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, where he is an eye, and where he kind of set up this whole world and this whole sort of premise that he needs the ring in order to regain corporal form, and that he actually has no body and he's just a spirit.
Yeah, it would have negated that whole problem of Sauron getting the ring again.
So exactly. So I think that's definitely something. That's definitely one of the reasons he must have just said, "Actually, no, this is a terrible idea."
And we could have been like, "Why haven't we seen Sauron before? Like, where has he been this whole time?" Yeah. Now we don't really know, like, how early in the process. Like, maybe they filmed that scene before they filmed lots of scenes in the first movie, because all three movies were filmed like back to back.
Exactly. I was actually just thinking now, I wonder if they shot that before they even came up with the idea of having him be a flaming eye. And then they were like, because that would make sense, because it wouldn't really make sense to say he is a flaming eye, he's a spirit, and he needs the ring to regain his actual form. And
I do think so, because they do talk about that in the other movies, how Sauron needs the ring to regain his form. Yeah. So it would have been weird if he just showed up at the end. So I think it, like, I've seen that fact a few times online, but it doesn't specify how early that change was made, or how early that scene was shot, because I'd like to know. If anyone knows the answer, please send that in, because I'd love to know.
Yeah, please do. Because I was going to say that I remember reading that for Gandalf, when he was shooting some of his scenes, I don't know if it was his very first scene, or I think it was maybe on his second day of shooting, he shot the scene of his goodbye to the hobbits at the Grey Havens. And that was on his second day on set, or maybe his first day on set. I can't really remember for sure.
I think it was his first. I think I remember hearing that was his very first scene.
I think, and so that's kind of like amazing how he has this like big heartfelt goodbye to these, and he's like, I don't even, what's your name again? Like, he doesn't even know who these people are. Like.
Yeah, exactly. I always wonder that about movies. Why did they do it not in order? Well, I understand why some snes can't be in order, because, some actors are only around at certain times, but
location settings and things like that as well.
Yeah. But like, for that, like, why would you pick the last scene to say goodbye?
Obviously, it just made sense at the time, I suppose.
Yeah, well, good thing it didn't affect the movie, because it's a big tearjerker.
Yeah. And as I said in our episode on Gandalf, that they kind of moved around they kind of delayed a lot of Gandalf's scenes so that he could finish shooting X-Men, and then they could actually keep Ian McKellen as Gandalf. Yeah. So they kind of they shifted a lot of the order of the scenes. So maybe that wasn't intentional, that wasn't planned to be the first scene, but just because of the way they had to kind of move them along and kind of change the order of the scenes and kind of to keep that position for Ian McKellen, maybe that was one of the results, that just the scenes were kind of mixed up. So for me, I think that definitely this was a good final decision that Jackson came to, that he obviously his first decision to have Sauron, and then he said, you know what, I'm going to not show him at all and just keep him as being that kind of mystical eye. And if we show his actual, I mean, it could have been badass to see Sauron on screen battling again, but I don't think we really needed that. I think it's nice to keep that legend and that myth, and the only time we see him in his actual form is in kind of legend and in, like, as we saw, as we spoke about that sort of in our last podcast, that kind of legend is maybe this kind of, maybe not something that happened exactly that way, that it's kind of like
maybe over-exaggerated
exactly,
a
it's
little bit.
passed down over the years, and you kind of maybe he didn't look anything like that we see, and they're kind of just saying this is the story that's been passed down. So I think that's cool to just leave it that way and to
definitely.
History became legend. Legend became myth.
The last change I'm going to talk about now is about the healing hands of Aragorn. And in the book, Tolkien explains that the hands of the true king are hands of healing. And so Aragorn can physically heal people with his hands. And after the battle at Pelennor Fields, we see in the movie Aragorn actually healing Éowyn. And I never knew what was going on when I watched the scene. Do you remember that scene where
where she's got her broken arm?
Yeah, where Éomer like finds her on the battlefield and he's like screaming, and then suddenly it cuts to that night where Éomer is just sitting there looking at Éowyn, and she's lying there with her arm is in bits, and she's just lying on this kind of this little gurney thing, and Aragorn just kind of shows up and walks up, and he kind of starts like rubbing her arm and rubbing her head, and he gets like his little magic sponge.
I just assumed that's all she ever wanted, and she just became alive. She's like, "Oh, Aragorn is back."
Yeah, so it's like, I never knew. I was like, why would Aragorn be the one to, like, surely they have a medic around there or something like it. So I never knew what
they all died.
I never knew what was going on, and so when I was kind of looking into this, I was like, oh yeah, of course. So that's why Aragorn is the one, and he's like, rubbing her forehead, and then eventually she kind of just wakes up, and and then we see her on the mend and getting to know Faramir.
Yeah, very good.
But so we see that in the movie, but in the book, they actually explain that he heals Éowyn, he heals Merry, and he heals Faramir, all three of those. And then after he heals them, he spends the entire night just going from tent to tent and healing as many people as he can. And he's just like this, this
Jesus.
He's just like this healer, this like kind of.
He's like a little mini Jesus that just runs around healing everyone. All the lepers come to Aragorn.
He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy.
So that's pretty cool. It's just like this extra little, like the true king of Gondor just has all these little like tricks up his sleeve. As I said, like other things, it's not explained in a lot of detail in the movie, but it's nice that Jackson included that scene as well. That we kind of So as I said, I've watched these movies so many times, and that's again something that like I kind of when I read in the books, I kind of forgot about it and didn't pay much attention, and then when I was researching this podcast, I remember I found that again. I was saying, oh yeah, that's so cool. And I know the next time I watch the movies, I'm definitely going to look out for that scene. And it's like the movies.
Just going to have to watch it again tonight.
The movies that keep on giving, you're just like.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, but I think Jackson does a really, really good job of they kind of add these into the movie, but very
subtly,
very subtly, under the radar. And it is cool that they're nodded to all these little Easter eggs, but
exactly.
But yeah,
so and in that way that you're kind of when you're watching the movie, it all makes sense, and it all made perfect sense to me as a first time watcher who didn't know anything about the lore of Lord of the Rings, and now years later when I know a lot more and I go back and I watch the movies, I'm still just like, oh wow, that's obviously like a nod to this lore or this kind of like reality that we know exists in Middle Earth. So
yeah, like you said, the movies that just keep on giving. It's true. Every time you watch it, that's why you have to watch it a million times. Watch the trilogy.
There is only one Lord of the Ring, and he does not share power.
Well, guys, that's all from us this week on the Council of Elrond. Thank you all so much for listening. It really means a lot to us. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please help us out by giving us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, or maybe consider sharing this podcast with a friend. You can find the links to our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook in the podcast info section. I leave you now with a quote from the great Professor Tolkien. Farewell, and may the blessing of elves, men, and all free folk go with you.